All right, we're live. So I'm Nick from Sync Logistics Training, and welcome to our second Learning and Development webinar. So as some quick background information on these, if you're not familiar, we decided to start putting out these monthly webinars about various learning and development topics because learning and development tends to be something that freight companies need a little bit of education on. So we're going to take one topic each time. We're going to bring in experts to talk about it. And the goal is to just have some actionable takeaways that people watching can bring back to their own brokerage. Today's topic is going to be learning paths. What are they? Why are they important? And how can you actually build them and use them effectively? But before we get into it, let's do a quick round of introductions. Jackie, do you want to kick things off?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Jackie Bugay. I am the Director of People and Culture over at Tucker Company Worldwide. We are a 3PL. And Nick invited me here today to talk about my passion for training and development, which has definitely started from various different places, a place of despair of why is the training and development program not producing the results that we really need it to produce, and definitely a place of passion because I truly believe in meaningful initiatives in every single workplace and trying our best to not have just checkbox initiatives like we trained you, check, go out into the world. It's no, I really genuinely believe in trying to create something that you can actually use and build upon your identity in every single workplace that you work in.
Perfect. Thank you for joining us. Excited to have you on. We've been talking for a long time. Erica, you want to do a quick intro?
Sure. I'm Erica Winston. I'm the manager of training and development at Sunset Transportation in Sunset Hills, Missouri. I have a freight brokerage background. I came from the operation about 6 years in there, and now I'm here figuring out the whole training and learning and development of and what that looks like at a 3PL.
Perfect. And Scott, your first two-time attendee or two-time panelist here. Want to do a quick intro? Oh, you're muted.
What's funny is that's very common and when I'm on the word of the street. So it's, but yeah, 2 times a streak, right? But yeah, my name is Scott Watanabe. I'm the Director of Agent Training and Growth here at Armstrong Transport Group. Little background, I've been doing the operations or being the broker for the last 10 years. And then in the last 3 of those 10 years was actually developing the training department for Armstrong. Started out as the agency, just training on the Boise agent office. Then we got acquired, and so I started training all of our company stores. And then just recently rolled into the agent training and growth because our agent success department is somewhat new in the Armstrong realm, and we realized in the agent success department, there hasn't been anybody that has been actually doing the role. And they said, "Hey, Scott, you want to come do this?" And so I've been now attached myself to all the agents who truly want to grow and learn and develop not only their agent offices, but their employees as well. So it's been fun.
All right, man. Happy to have you on. And let's jump into some of these discussion questions. So we have discussion questions. If we go off on tangents, I'm fine with it. We're going to loosely follow these. But the first one is just starting out very broad, and we're going to kind of get more granular from there. But what is a learning path? And can you give us some examples so we know what we're talking about today? Jackie, you want to start with this one again?
Sure. I think a simple way to put it is a learning path is a training curriculum, a curriculum to set anyone up for success for any particular objective. So if the objective is getting acclimated with an organization, acclimated with your new role, if, down the line, it's more of like a development opportunity, you need help in a particular competency, say it's negotiation, say it's critical thinking. Hopefully your organization has developed a training program that has tagged different training topics to different competencies that they're hoping that training helps you develop. And so learning paths don't need to be siloed to new team members or new hires. They can be part of your entire life cycle. And it's basically, if you think about it from a schooling perspective, it's, presumed chronological order of different types of topics that the trainers, your manager feels as though you must absorb in order to understand something and apply it in your everyday life, and that's going to help set you up for success. So the order matters a lot of the time. There's different prerequisites that you really need to know in order to grasp the meat and potatoes of the true topic that they're hoping that really resonates with you. So there's so much to a learning path, which is why I'm sure Nick found it beneficial for us to talk about it today. There's the mode matters, the frequency matters, the trainer matters, how often, the cadence matters. And so having a purposeful, intentional, and deliberate training path is really what we're hoping everyone walks away with today.
I think it was a great answer. I really like how you brought up the fact that it's not just for new hires. It is also for experienced folks. I think that gets overlooked a ton. Erica, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure. I have an example of a learning path. Learning path to me, I love everything that Jackie said, but to kind of build off that and get a little bit more specific with transportation, our learning paths here are kind of like our career paths. So, you start at the entry level role and you build upon some, foundational things in transportation. And then from there, you go to carrier sales, you go to account management. Those are your paths. And then to get to those roles, there are things you need to learn and build upon to develop in your career. So those are some examples that we use here at Sunset.
Scott, anything you'd want to add?
I think one of the most important things about having learning paths or creating learning paths is like I said, it's make sure they're ever evolving. Because in the beginning, when you're just starting a brokerage training program, you think of one thing, how to become a broker. And then one thing that we did at Armstrong is every class we sent out like questionnaires and said, hey, what did you like? What didn't you like? And then we not only just for the individuals who went through the training, but the leaders who these guys are going to. What are they missing out on? What aren't they missing out on? And then where should we focus this, the carrier sales? What should we add to the customer sales? How much of that training should be involved with each other? How much should not? It's like, why do our carrier sales need to know how to cold call a customer, right? So creating those individual paths is going to help you identify, the individual roles. Like Erica was saying, I love how you said it truly is. It could be your career path too, not just your role. Because after that, we always talk about continued development is really key to continuing, that continuing education and always growing and having something to offer your people after the training department, the initial training, I guess.
You touched on a lot of stuff there that I hope we have time at the end to circle back to, because I think the cross-training element of these learning paths is also super important. That again, in my experience, a lot of brokers kind of neglect that. They get really tunnel vision on one specific role or competency that they're training on. And it tends to be very reactive that they get training in different areas just because oh my gosh, all of a sudden we need some training on this. So let's throw it in there. But anyway, I'm going off on a tangent. So Scott, to kind of piggyback off of the last question. So why are learning paths important? And you can either talk about that from the employer perspective or the employee perspective. Take whatever way you want.
Giving them, if you have a path lined out, they know exactly, hopefully they come in, you present, hey, this is what your next 2-3 weeks, this is what your next 3 to 4 weeks is going to be, then they have something to look forward to. They can either pre-study or if you guys have an online module that corresponds with it or collaborates with it, they can start pre-learning that. But then also you have it from the management side or the leader side. Is like they understand and they know what part they're say if they're in week 2 of training, they know they can look at a training calendar, they can look at a syllabus or agenda, and they know exactly where their people are at in training.
Yeah, I can also add to that. I think it also helps the candidate experience. That's something that we're really pushing here at Sunset. You know, you're a candidate before you enter Sunset, but when you are an employee, you're still a candidate because there are other opportunities for you internally. And people are more likely to stay at an organization if there's continuous learning and development going on.
Yeah, one thing that I'll add to it too is I think the application is really why learning paths are so important. When you come into an organization, or maybe you've been in the organization, you're coming into a new role, it can always feel, at least definitely for me personally, and then the feedback I get a lot of the time, it's like a fire hose of information. And you almost get really excited to get to the finish line. And then you're in your role and you're like, what was that thing that they taught me a few weeks ago? Or wait, what was I supposed to do at this critical moment? And so, you know, having a designated path to success, hopefully what you can embed into that learning path are different types of proficiency checks. They could be on the fly, acted out role play. It could be a quiz. It could be, you know, shadowing work. It could be a number of different items that you can really, implement to assess how well that you've absorbed the content. But for me, why learning paths are so important is to demonstrate the application of really what you're learning and when you're going to be applying what you're learning on an every single day basis, because there's a lot to unpack when you either join an organization or go into a new role. It could be the culture, behavior standards. It could be, you know, you could have come from a different place in the industry. And yes, you have a familiarity with trucks. You have a familiarity with, you know, the way things work. But every single organization does it a tiny bit differently. And so I really think that learning paths are important to help personify the application of the elements that we're supposed to be retaining and then doing on our own on a regular basis.
I think it was really interesting what you said about it almost stems the fire hose to a degree, because I talked to a lot of brokers where training is like, here's your 1 or 2 week long crash course, and you're gonna learn like everything you could possibly need to know about brokerage, right?
Right, and then everything you learn, so then you learn nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right,
exactly.
Yeah, I learned that I think you have to repeat something 13 times to somebody for them to actually remember it. So just learning something once is not going to stick.
Yeah.
What we run into, I feel, in this industry is situational learning. You learn it up first. Maybe you'll learn it in week 1. And I even tease some of these guys on the sales floor now is like, man, that's week 1 stuff, right? This is week 2 stuff. Why are you even asking me this? But if I always use this example because it always comes up is we'll teach how to issue a basic fuel advance, what is required on our side, what is the background, what is needed. It's 2 years since this guy graduated from the department. He comes up to me. He's like, Scott, I was like, what's up? He's like, how do you issue a fuel advance? I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, if they've never come across that situation,
right.
Not, there's a lot of our stuff that is truly perishable skills, perishable knowledge. You get into someone who just finds a niche and just runs with flatbed for his entire career, and then all of a sudden he lands a potential customer that is frozen chicken, and he gets completely scared because he hears bad stories about refrigerated freight and anything like that. And you got to just go back and say, we've done this before. This is not a big deal. We have these processes in place. But You still have to have a central location or a resource manual or even what we call Armstrong Academy, where little things like that, how to request an EFS check, they can pull that up in a resource manual and say, oh yeah, now I remember.
It's so natural for your brain to filter out information that it deems not relevant at the time, because you have so much coming your way. And to that same phrase, that fire hose of information, and your brain will naturally just filter out information that they're like, it's, this is for a rainy day. And then the rainy day comes and you're digging in the archives of the filing cabinet in your brain for, when did I learn that and why? And so I do think that learning pads really help provide that framework, that road ahead of the why.
Yeah, and like there's that thing called the forgetting curve, right? Where like if you're taught something once and then it isn't reinforced periodically, like you forget like 90% or something like that of what you've been taught. And I think that's an important part of what you're talking about learning paths, is the reinforcement, right? Because if you haven't used something in a while, like I guarantee you're going to forget particulars about how to ship hazmat, right? Like it's been so long since I've done, I have no idea anymore. So it's that reinforcement concept. And Scott, you were talking about like having a place like in the manuals and stuff. Like another benefit that like I know some of my customers experience with learning paths is it just lessens that burden on management for each time it needs to be trained. Like a lot of brokers go into training. It's just like, okay, like I know you're the fifth person I've trained this year, but it's like it's the fifth time because it's like it's the first time because I don't have a process in place. So like while it's a bit of a lift, like at the beginning to kind of build these things out, it helps for subsequent people that you're going to train the exact same things to.
Yeah, the consistency from that is key, because you could get Scott on a really bad day and him forgetting the keys to the castle because he forgot his morning coffee, because he's just the trainer that, didn't have, is not adhering to a defined learning path. And that really can translate to the consistency of employees' ability to navigate the job that they're supposed to be doing.
That's a good point, because I had when we got acquired, I obtained we obtained 3 different offices now. So I had 4 different offices, or 3 different offices that I had to train new hires in. And so we hired at each individual locations training specialists. And we found early on that, this is the program, but one of them wasn't it wasn't presenting the way that that I created. And so we had to adjust, and what we did was we created actual facilitator guides for each modular, where it was like we got down and dirty, because we hired a instructional designer too, and he's not a subject matter expert, but he knows how to put subject matter experts on information on paper to make it look presentable, right? As designing the instruction. And so when we created these facilitator guides, it was like, first 5 minutes, do this. Here's some bullet points that you must say. And then if you have experiences, present them accordingly. But that truly helped us get on a more uniform path across all offices.
Yeah, we did something very similar here with the facilitator guide. And then something else that we used to do is department overviews. So new people in the organization or existing employees can learn more about different departments. A director would be in a room for 30 minutes, talk about their department. I kind of just let them do it on their own, and it wasn't being facilitated the way that I wanted it to be. So I created, a guide, like you said, first 5 minutes, introduce everybody, next 5 minutes, talk about this. So while we're training people, we need to make training materials for ourselves as well.
Yeah. Keep it consistent, keep it uniform. Because when you find that each time you're adding new stuff, or you're improving and evolving your training department, but you still want to keep the good stuff, and then you want to take away the bad stuff, right? Or the stuff that just wasn't working, and making sure that you have all those, and then I'll make sure people know that you're ever evolving. Because when people think that, oh, you're just teaching the same stuff over and over and over again, it's like, we are, but we're not. We're taking your feedback and then we're adjusting the training, because this is what you're at. We're here to support you. We're here to teach what you feel is necessary for the office and for the, align with the leadership needs. But if you're not going to give us that feedback, we can't create those learning paths that you want to see.
So I'm going to piggyback off of that by jumping into the next question here. How do you identify what should be in different learning paths for specific roles? So like, how do you figure out what those competencies or skills are that people need to be trained on? Erica, go for it.
I can go first. So at Sunset, we have a training steering committee. So what we've done is select managers or somebody in a position of influence at another branch. So we have buy-in at all of our branches. And then we do have some key stakeholders at the corporate level as well. We meet once a month. We kind of talk about what training gaps are we seeing? What do we want our carrier sales ones to know? What do we want the twos to know? We talk about, our monthly training, what worked, what didn't work. So that's what we do once a month as we meet as a group. There's about 15 of us. Yeah.
You called it the training steering meeting, right? Is that what you said?
Training steering committee. Yes.
Committee. I actually like that. I'm gonna present that. Writing this down now. See, someone with the experience. I mean, that's great, because one of the things that always, to finish answering that question is you have to have the buy-in. You have to have, and not only the buy-in, but the leaders have to know what you're training. There's been plenty of times, I'm sure you've ran into it, where someone will criticize one of the modules or something that they feel is wrong, right? And then you ask, okay, well, when did you take it? And they're like, well, I haven't yet. So then you're like, how could you criticize something you've never even taken?
Yeah.
And so, and us as the trainees, and we have to be, I guess, give grace to that, because they are, sometimes the individuals we go to as far as the subject matter experts, because they have the experience. But you still have to, your leaders have to hold your mid-level managers accountable. It's like, do not come to us with a problem, if you haven't done the training yourself, and if you don't have a possible solution.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've done a really solid transformation on our job descriptions in a number of different ways. So I'll start with like the actual accountabilities and responsibilities. We've actually, done a really solid attempt of making sure that every single accountability and responsibility, it's not task oriented, like complete this task. It is whatever the initiative is, whatever the responsibility or accountability it is, it's tied to a strategic initiative. So we're constantly connecting the team member to anything that they're doing in their role to a strategic initiative of why this matters. And then the second part of the job description has performance measures, KPIs, position increase measures, and salary increase measures. So it's a great starting point to create a learning path, because if this is what you're going to be, and we have behavior standards as well on that job description. So if this is what you're going to be reviewed upon, this is what's going to mark your salary increase ability, your position increase ability. It's a great framework to build a learning path, but something that I think is imperative to creating a learning path is, of course, connecting and collaborating with a departmental leadership team by creating some type of training intake form that's consistent with understanding the objectives, intended proficiencies, when are they going to use this and why. But something I love to add in, and I know you guys probably do the same or agree to some extent, is connecting so deeply with a SME, because there's so often where we have a more tenured or higher level individual on the team, and they get thrown the weird stuff. They get thrown the weird situations. This is coming out. Let's just give it to this person because they have enough experience to be able to handle it. Well, I want to know what those weird experiences are, and I want to turn them into my proficiency check-ins, my some type of it's engaging. For one, it's like, did this really happen? It did. But two, it really hopefully will get us out of the routine of throwing it to the experienced people and instead tossing it to someone greener to give them the opportunity to be able to experience it. So I think it's important to include the non-traditional situations in a learning path, because they happen and they happen regularly, and they're often given to the more experienced individual because they're weird, they're uncomfortable. No one has there's no exact procedure to do it that's published, because we're also an ISO certified organization. So we adhere to procedures, policies, work instructions. That's going to feed the learning path. So what's not going to feed the learning path likely are those types of examples, those real life situations that I'd love for, if it's a new team member to experience or someone transitioning to that role to experience.
So something you brought up that I want to piggyback on, because I experience this a lot talking to folks, is like the importance of those initial job descriptions. A lot of times it's like we with our customers work on building out learning paths for folks, right? We start having these conversations about okay, what are the skills and competencies that this person needs? Well, before that, what are their roles and responsibilities? And the answer sometimes is, I don't really know. Right. If I were to I kind of have a job description for them, but this particular responsibility, it might be theirs, it might be theirs. I'm not really sure. So in my experience, at least, until you have those roles really set in stone, it's tough to start building learning paths because you don't really know what you're building towards.
And not to mention, it's so important for the manager and any leader and any leadership team in the company to really stick within a job description, because there's so often where you are doing things on a regular basis that have nothing to do with your job description, but you're doing them well. Well, where does that fit into the development that you're getting for support to be able to continue to do something like that? I perform outside my job description all of the time. And that's not to say that shouldn't happen ever, but how can we do a better job of, keeping, because job descriptions can get dusty. So how can we do a better job of making it a responsibility of ours to make sure that they're relevant and make sure that the proper support is there to be able to set anyone up for success, to be able to execute and evolve from that job description, because they can get irrelevant at times. It's a great sign that the organization's growing and consolidating and what have you. And so make sure that you're not becoming irrelevant for your employees to have something to revert back to of what are my true accountabilities and responsibilities in this organization.
Yeah. And I think sometimes the way we approach this isn't necessarily tying it really strictly to the job role, because you have to kind of make some logical leaps every now and then, right? Cross-training, I think, is an example, right? It might not specifically be in your job role that you shouldn't be an asshole to your coworkers, right? That's probably not written down.
It actually is in ours.
Good for you guys.
It's a respect of other people's properties and choices.
Well, we have our behavior standards is what I'm trying to say.
Good. But for us, a big thing is for cross-training, we think it helps build what we call professional empathy, right? Yeah. So if you're in carrier sales, maybe you should spend some time scheduling appointments and building load so you understand what that part of your organization's doing, and you're not so angry when they don't come back with the appointment times you wanted, right? And vice versa. If you're in the customer-facing rep, maybe you should have spent some time booking freight so you'll understand why people are struggling to cover certain loads. It's not that they're just not interested in your freight. Maybe it's a load of scrap metal from middle of nowhere to middle of nowhere, and it's just hard to cover. So professional empathy is a big one.
Well, that's
for us.
why I say that it's built into our job descriptions, because empathy is one of our behavior standards.
Mhm.
So, within our behavior standards warrants a ton of training. If you can say, be empathetic, Nick, but if you don't know how to personify a behavior like that in a workplace setting, you're going to probably feel pretty lost and probably not do it and just try to be nice instead of being empathetic, being collaborative, being respectful, having agility. And, that's why it's important to have training associated with those types of potentially large concepts for people. Maybe they're not doing that outside of the workplace, but we're expecting them to do it inside of the workplace. And we really want to cultivate a place where you really don't have to change your identity much from inside to outside, but you may not have a lot of experience of doing that on a regular basis. So I do think that, to your point, Nick, it really should start with a more well-defined job description and include those things on the job description if you're going to be hiring for that, firing for that, promoting for that, and developing for that anyway.
Mm-hmm. So our next question kind of piggybacks off of this one. It's vague, but how do you identify the proper length or amount of material for a learning path? Anybody want to tackle that one, or should I skip to the next one?
Just enough.
I would say I don't know how to answer like the amount of material. I don't know that there's ever too much as long as it's spread out over a long period of time. But I would say the future is micro learning. Everybody's attention spans has become like this big. So we've got to meet the people where they are and give them smaller bits of learning at a time.
Yeah, and I challenge this question to maybe focus less on the length and more on the cadence of training, because you can get trained on something when you first get hired and then never get trained on it again. And you do need a refresher, especially if anything has changed, and it shouldn't necessarily be up to the employee to just know that. And then the other thing I would focus on is mode. There's such a huge benefit of e-learning. It's streamlined, it's consistent, it saves so much time. But if it's not the right mode for the content, it's the right mode for a lot of content. But if it's not the right mode for some content, then change up the mode to be more of a classroom setting, more role playing, more simulation. It depends on what the training topic really is. So I think the ones to watch out for are cadence and mode.
I like that. So my next questions are on experienced employees. I definitely like to talk about this one a little bit. What should learning paths look like for experienced people? Because I know this is an area where a lot of brokers struggle, right? Like they'll get new hires somewhat plotted out. But then once you're, say, a carrier rep, making X amount of money, booking X amount of freight, the mentality tends to be, he's good, he or she's good, right? Like they don't need any more training. So when it comes to those people, do you have any suggestions for how to build learning paths for them?
I think this is where I feel this is where we're at in our next level as far as Armstrong is, because we're getting enough structure where we do have different levels of capacity, capacity rep, then a senior capacity rep, capacity lead, and then we can utilize, you can start utilizing those individual next steps or those career progression steps, and then start building learning paths based off, you can produce enough to become the next, but do we have anything that we can add on the learning side that is either required or mandatory for you to do before you get that next step as well? Because there's a difference between someone, I think Coyote has the hot pod, right? Where it's just a guy grinding on the freight that nobody wants. There's a difference between that sales rep than the one that's been doing it for 5 years, who understands the importance of carrier relationships, how to build those carrier relationships, and how to maintain those carrier relationships. That's another further development part, at least in the carrier sales side.
I'd recommend that the learning paths for more experienced employees be more behavior dominant, because I think at that point you pretty much know the lay of the land. You understand how to utilize the various systems and handle different procedures and policies and work instructions. But when it comes to, an organization's, if it's behavior standards, if you call them core values, you see transparency very differently at one level in the organization than you do at a higher level in the organization. You view agility as very different. You view leadership, you view excellence, you view those behaviors differently. And when you are experienced, when you're tenured, when you're getting promoted, when you're moving around the organization, you want to make sure that those individuals understand how to emulate those behaviors on a regular basis, because you're telling everyone else in the organization, look at that person. That's who you should be if you'd like to advance in the organization in some way. And if they're not, in addition to that, I think that these experienced employees in their learning paths should have a deep sense of business acumen. You want individuals in the organization to be able to articulate where the company is going, and why, so that no matter what room they're in, they're constantly tying the front lines, the individuals the executors, constantly tying them back to the strategic vision. Because if you don't have individuals advocating for that in smaller groups, they could potentially separate, the employees from the leadership team, instead of, uniting everyone together and understanding the bigger picture. I think for the leadership team, it's easy to get away from the what is done look like, the execution side of things. And for the people who are actually executing the strategy, I think it's easy for them to just live in their world and forget the 40,000 foot view. So, keeping that in mind, I think if, when I do suggest creating a learning path for an experienced team member, I tend to hyper focus more on the behavior sides first, because I think you really want to get that right.
I can speak to this too, because I've got some real example that I recently encountered. So at Sunset, we have carrier sales 1, 2, 3, and then it goes to team lead. So I was talking with 2 different carrier 3s. So naturally, their next step would be a team lead. And I was asking each of them independently. One of them, this guy he's a grinder. He wants to come in. He's got, I think someone called him an octopus at one time, because he's just got a million arms and can book a bunch of freight at once. And I asked him, what kind of stuff do you want to learn? And he just wants to learn more about just the industry on a larger scale. I don't even know if that's possible to wrap your arms around everything in transportation. And then the other guy, I asked him what he wanted to learn. He wanted to start learning how to manage people. And so I think that we need to stop assuming that people just want to just keep advancing, keep learning things. Some people are okay with what they're doing. And that is something that I've had to kind of get used to. I was always like, no, you need to learn more, you need to grow. And some people just don't want to do that. And that's okay.
So my personal opinion on that is I'm really excited you brought up those 2 different examples, because I've always thought that more experienced higher training needs to be just highly individualized, because particularly at that point in someone's career, not everyone's going to have the same goals or the same motivations, right? I don't want to manage people. I'm terrible at it. I don't enjoy it at all. I do love learning about the industry and making money. So I can relate to your octopus guy. That was your octopus guy, right?
Yeah, yeah.
As opposed to the other one. So yeah, I think that's a really good point to make. Jackie, Scott, anything to piggyback on top of that?
Yeah, I would just say that, Erica's point is something I think that not on purpose, but tends to be lost in a manager's mind. I mean, I had this conversation a lot in my previous organization, and I have it a lot now, that we cannot assume that because someone's really good at their craft that they're eager to be the next leader. And trust me, your name comes up often in succession planning conversations. And so it's so imperative that managers really understand exactly what is Erica's, unlocking Erica's hidden potential is from both Erica's perspective and the manager's perspective. What are Erica's goals? And that's really important to take into consideration, because if you put Erica in a position that she doesn't really like, you risk losing Erica completely if you end up doing that. And not to mention, organizations need to have people like, I can't remember which example you gave, but like the individual who is just hungry to master their craft and hone in on their skills, and not necessarily advance to a next level of as a people leader or even a departmental leader if they're not managing people and they're just managing a function. And you need individuals like that, because those are the mentors in the organization. Those are the ones to look out for in a great way. They keep organizations running, because otherwise you are constantly hiring and developing and promoting. And, sometimes you get to a point where you're pretty stacked. So you do need those individuals in the organization who really like what they do and want to master that craft and hone in on it. And sometimes you just don't know that's what they want because you didn't have the conversation. And so I say it's lost on managers a lot, and it's just not intentional. You assume they must want that next step of leadership. And it's important to have the conversation, because the names do get brought up in succession planning conversations if you're a really great performer. And then I always ask the question, like, do you know what they want?
Well, that's an excellent point, because sometimes we feel that that's what they want. Is that what's like we assume? Sometimes we assume that, hey, they're a high performer, so we got to make them a manager, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure we've all been in that situation where that girl was just a high performer. We start throwing a team under them. We realized they're just a really good hard performer. Maybe we shouldn't keep adding individuals on them, because they can manage a book of business with the best of them, but they can't manage people. And they'll take steps because you put them in that position. They'll take steps to try to manage, but is it truly where their heart is? And that's where some of us leaders have to be humble about, maybe that wasn't a good decision. We have to pivot, and we got to either get them back to where they're doing, or else the individuals who are going to grow underneath them don't get the same watering as
And I've had people say to me, I don't want to let my leader down by telling them I'm not interested in this. And they're going to think that I don't have drive and I don't have initiative. So for anyone listening out there, I think it's important to take stock in the fact that it is needed in your organization for those individuals to really want to hone in on their skill and not necessarily advance to a people leading role in the organization. And, to Scott's point, what ends up happening a lot of the time are those managers are really just glorified, whatever they were previously. They end up, instead of their role being designed to be there for their team, they end up doing a lot of the role that they're managing and, not optimizing their team and developing their team and doing what a people leader needs to do, because that's really just not their wheelhouse, and that's more than okay.
I think that leads into these next couple of questions. We start talking about, like, what are some of the challenges around building out learning paths? How can those be overcome? And then the next one, like, how do people actually follow these learning paths? Who wants to start that one? Those two off.
I feel like, the challenge is always going to be I feel, and it has been, the buy-in from current leaders or mid-level, right? Like, well, I've done this long without any of it. Why do I need to do it now? Or how come I can't? My people can't just sit by me and I teach them everything I know? Why do they have to go through a training department, right? And so having that, but then also creating that consistent accountability. A lot of times we say, hey, we're going to do this, this, and this. And for a couple of weeks, we're pushing, hey, are you following up on your guy? Or how you doing on your guy? And then they get lost in the sauce or lost in ops. And we don't go back as trainees. We don't go back to the individuals that we don't do that follow-up, that monthly follow-up as we should. And they get lost. Then they start creating bad habits and they start going to forgetting what they learned because all they're doing is whatever their supervisor is doing, right?
Yeah, I'd say that the biggest challenge that I have is making sure that the training is meaningful and relevant and applicable to an individual's acclimation with the company and the culture or their role. I think that it's really easy to create checkbox training because organizations typically have something written, a policy, a procedure, what have you, and then you could just transform it into something more digestible instead of going the next step of unpacking what are the true objectives and intended outcome, and then reverse engineering to make a training out of it and understanding a learner's preferred method of learning and the training contents, the best mode for the training content itself. So it's very dynamic and it's complex. And I think that it's a great start for any organization to turn content into something more digestible. But I think the challenge becomes making it actually meaningful and then staying on top of that to make sure that that's relevant.
Yeah, I would say the challenges. So we use an LMS here. We call it Sunset University. A lot of our training is in person, but then a lot of it is also on there. So some challenges that we've definitely had are buy-in from people in the organization. Our biggest office is in St. Louis. That's our branch and our corporate headquarters. All of those people, they're all bought in. It's all of our other branches and stuff like that. So what we've been doing to kind of just, reiterate, hey, you got courses to take online, log in and take them. One, with that training steering committee that I was talking about, every month that we meet, then we'll put out notes to the leaders of the organization so they know what's going on. But another thing that we've done is every manager, supervisor, anybody that has a team, they should be doing some kind of formal check-in with them, whether it's biweekly, monthly. So what we've done is one question, or the last question for their check-ins are, what Sunset U courses do you have that are outstanding? So it's going to create that conversation and keep them accountable to get them done. And I've been in this role for a little over 2 years, and the participation rate and completion rate for the trainings has went up a lot because of that. Yeah. For checking in and just, I'm the annoying
That's
person
great.
all around the office. Like, hey, how are your courses going? Like, hey, did you do that training? Hey, where you at? Are you attending?
And that's something I like. I didn't even think about like actually going in and saying, hey, but it takes that, but it also takes the content's got to be good enough for people to want to, and maybe to ingest it, but then tell people, hey, this is actually really good. Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. When they see me on the sales floor and they got to pull up an Armstrong Academy video and it's just me telling them something I already told them
No, I get that. I've gotten a lot of feedback from our employees over the years. We used to use like pre-made content. It was outdated, cheesy type of training. But now we make all of our own training.
Yeah.
So we have all different kinds of tools, and my training specialist here has a graphic design background, and people like the content a lot more now that it's personalized to Sunset.
That's awesome. That's good that's where you want it. So that's awesome. And good on you. If like the increase of that, that's actually a good idea. I'm gonna bring that to my the L&D team. Is like how often are we actually considering or keeping our leaders accountable to their individual training and their reps training. So very cool. I like that.
No,
and good job with the increase. That's impressive. This truly is impressive.
Well, they're like, oh, I'm going to get it done, so I don't hear from Erica this month. It works.
Yeah.
That's
We had a little. We tried to do a point system where you get some points, and you gamify it as much as you can, and you get accolades, but little certificates or little graphics that you can put on your wherever you want to put it.
We kind of have that too. We incentivize people to get them done, but the incentivizing wasn't working either. So
yeah, it's hard. You got to have the heart for learning and development.
You really do, yeah.
Because people just want to make money in this industry, and the brokers will just broker. So,
So speaking of problems, how I always like to throw in this question because like working at a small brokerage versus a medium-sized brokerage versus a larger brokerage, and those are very different experiences. Everyone has very different resources available to them. What advice would you give to like a small or mid-sized shop about learning paths or training in general, really?
Get it right now before you grow faster. Get the foundational roots in now. And, if you ever get to a stage of preparing for growth, your foundation is set. You can turn the lights on and really not worry about how many people you're bringing through the door and growing too quickly for your size. And, because that's when silos can form if you don't have a standardized training curriculum. Where everyone's speaking the same language and understanding who you are as an organization and how to personify that on a regular basis. So do it ASAP is my
don't wait.
I would also say, don't worry about making it perfect or like figuring the whole thing out before you do it. Just start somewhere. Start small. Start at that entry-level role and build it out from there. And also don't worry about what it looks like at first.
It'll get better.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yes, 100%. It'll be better. Like until we actually until we hired an instructional design manager. I was just doing stuff on PowerPoint based off of what I found in a binder that this works for our people. Sweet. Okay, now let's put it into PowerPoint. I think the first one I found a graphic of someone's whatchamacallit, their business cards. I was like, oh, it's a business card background. This look good on a background of a PowerPoint presentation. And it worked, but it's just hilarious how things can evolve with the right people and the right talent and the right people who truly want to be involved in the learning and development. The individuals like us who see the benefits of truly training your people, truly developing your people, and creating that culture of learning, creative culture of learning, like our first.
Yeah, Scott, I was gonna just build off what you said just now and say, really create your culture of training and development, your culture of learning now would be amazing. Because what I really feel fortunate enough is Tucker Company really does have that buy-in from not only the top, but everyone. Everyone really wants to learn. And, I think a great way to do it is to, tie your development and training to your job description, into a salary increase measure or position increase measure. Like if you want to get these things, then you must show us that you really understand them and can apply it on an everyday basis. Yeah. And then creating a culture of learning is your leadership team and your managers advocating to your team members on a regular basis. Like, why don't you take some time today to really unpack this and see what happens tomorrow when you apply it on a regular basis, and creating that culture of learning is from the top down and is from a leadership level, but it's also very individualized with the specific manager and employee.
So speaking of being able to just like learn and apply things, we got one more question left here, and that's how do you evaluate the success of a learning path? Jackie, do you have any thoughts on that one?
I hate that you started with me actually, because
oh no,
the only reason why I say that is because I'm still really figuring that out. This is like the evolution for me. I've gone from like one end of the spectrum to the next, and I feel like I have writer's block with where I want to take this to. And we just hired a training and development manager. I believe she's participating as a viewer today. So shout out to her. She started last Monday. And I'm so excited to have her in the organization and really to learn from her of like exactly how we should be evaluating the success of a learning path. Because the easy answer is you evaluate the success because the individuals who are participating in that learning path are applying it on a regular basis and advancing to whatever they want to do in the organization, whether that's mastering their craft or throughout the organization. And that's what it looks like. That's what done looks like. But I think it can be a little deeper than that and more granular to be able to develop a more robust learning path is what I'll say.
Oh, makes sense. Erica, Scott, anything to add on?
I would say I'm also kind of figuring it out too. We recently developed scorecards for operational roles. So I am in the process of just redoing and updating the training that we have for each role. And I think once that's finished, we'll be able to see if it was successful or not.
I think we had this conversation like off camera, but in reality, it's like I think there is a perception that there are some brokers, some high level brokers or the top 10 brokers out there that have really good training. But in reality, it's just subpar because that's what has been accepted in the industry.
Right.
We need to create a culture within the industry that, hey, there are bad brokers for a reason, is because nobody's training them to be good brokers. And if the culture doesn't change where learning and development is a must, and I feel it's within the last 3 to 5 years where it's truly been, maybe with, guys like Nick, like myself, like Chris Jolly, the freight coach, and like those individuals who truly want to create a better industry for all people, brokers, truck drivers, shippers. They all have to be on the same page, and they all have to be able to understand that development is important, and always learning everybody else's role is going to create a better synergy. Like, I guess maybe that was a buzzword 2 years ago, but like the industry has to just be better, and it can't be better if we're not teaching people to be better.
Totally makes sense. I think it's probably a good point to wrap this up because it's almost 2:00. Let's go around real quick. Just let people know who you are, how people can reach out if they want to. Jackie, you want to start?
Oh yeah, please. Please reach out to me. Oh wow.
You're still on.
Yeah,
I'm sorry. I just got like the video just popped up of this video. So I was like, am I in the Matrix?
Happened to me earlier. I get it.
Yeah, please reach out to me. My name's Jackie Bugay. You can find me on LinkedIn. I work for Tucker Company Worldwide. I'm the director of people and culture there. And I'm just going to go out on a limb and share my email address, which might be bold, but it's pretty obvious. It's jackie.bugay@tuckerco.com. So please, I'd love to connect. When we all met together prior to doing today's session, I think we were all on the same page as we want to build this community of training and development passion people and get different ideas from you all. Because like the last question just showed, we're still in the thick of it. We're still trying to create and finalize a strategy that works in any type of market, in any type of organization, in any type of environment. So I think I speak for everyone as we definitely want to build on to this community.
Perfect. Scott, how do people reach out?
Yeah, same. LinkedIn. I'll be just as bold. It's just Scott at armstrongtransport.com. Yeah, follow me on LinkedIn. I also have some cool stuff on Instagram, the Freight Sensei. So I try to put out some Freight Tip
Yeah, I
Tuesdays
gotta
every
follow
once in a
that.
while. So
Yeah.
it's fun. It's
It's
good
good. I
stuff.
like it.
I need to refresh some of it. But yeah, again, just to reiterate, it has to change. Industry wide training and development is purposeful, and it'll create a new era of brokers if we want to, and the stigma will get better as long as the development is there.
Perfect. Erica, you want to round things out? Final
All
thoughts, how to
right.
reach out?
I'm Erica Winston. You can find me on LinkedIn. I work for Sunset Transportation in Sunset Hills, Missouri. If you want to email me, go ahead. Please don't try to sell me anything. It's ewinston@sunsettrans.com.
All right. Perfect. That does it. Thanks, everybody, for attending. I had a great time, and we're out.
Thanks again, Nick. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Nick.
Thanks, Nick.